Welcome to the theory notes for prepare dishes using basic methods of cookery. I'm Chef Christian, and we're here to talk through some information. SITHCCC027 is the code for this unit, and yeah, this is the fundamentals of how we treat food. Yeah. Basic methods of cookery is a great subject. It sort of gets into the beginning of it all, and I guess it's a fundamental. It's actually within the cookery program. It is a prerequisite unit, and rightly so, because all food products use certain cookery methods for specific reasons, right? Um, if we're talking about sautéing or poaching or grilling, braising, baking, sous vide, smoking, curing, all those different cookery methods are used for a purpose. And whilst some of them are interchangeable, um, that doesn't mean we can apply a cookery method to one particular cookery method to everything, or use one particular item for every cookery method. Okay, um, so a lot of the basic French methods were very minimalistic and based around um, the available tools and ideals we had a long time ago. And as we become more modern in our understanding of food and science, and indeed as we become more diverse with more cultures coming into our uh, or mixing within our other cultures, we become more diverse within our learning and understanding of food and what we can do to it. Right? And what I'm talking about there is smoking, brining, curing, sous vide. These are all modern approaches to uh, food from other cultures. Right? Now, I definitely know some chefs out there that we say, these methods have been around for a long time. It's like, that's right. Um, Sous vide, for example, I met a chef once that said, they were using sous vide in the Second World War. And that's probably right, but that's not the idea of what it is now. The idea of what it is now is about precision temperature control. Back then, that's not what it was about. It was about how can we warm food up and make it easier for transport and to warm up. So, yeah, modern approaches, basic methods of cookery, great subject. Getting straight into it, we talk about characteristics of foods and food group types. Dairy products is a food group. When we're talking about dairy products, we're talking about products that are made from milk or cream. So that includes milk, cream, includes cheese, butter, yogurt. These are all potentially hazardous and high-risk foods. Okay, you can get them fresh or processed, and we might be talking about UHT there, ultra heat treatment, which means that we can store it for longer. Maybe it's dried. So, one of the differences between cheeses is how long we store it for. So the longer we store it for, the less moisture that's in there, the stronger the flavour. You can get dairy products with different fat contents, and and some of them specifically can be modified to give variety. we get flavored milks, we get flavored yogurts, we get different bacteria added to cheeses to give a different outcome. Um, yeah, sour cream, all these sorts of products are come essentially from milk and are transformed into different products. Dry goods, another food group type. Dry goods are is a very broad scope term, right? Because some of these products are convenience foods, right? Like dried pasta, right? Maybe they are beans that are tinned, okay, or canned. Maybe it's fruits that are tinned or canned. A lot of products that come in cans are essentially convenience products, right? Um, and again, heat treated and sealed for longer storage. Okay, maybe it's dried or dehydrated foods. Yeah, dried foods might be it could be dried beans, it could be dried fruits, dried berries. Dehydrated foods might even include uh, freeze dried. Um, yeah, so we could be talking about fruits there, um, and they might be used for a variety of things. Um, yeah, generally we keep them in the dry store area. Dry store area, as we should already know, is a room temperature area, should be between 18 and 24 degrees. Any higher than that, and you risk creating making products sweat or overheat, which means that they can spoil. Okay. Um, Depending on where you work, I knew a chef once that ran a health conscious focused cafe, and he used to buy his dry good products in 50-kilo bags. And I'm talking about like chickpeas and flour, whatever it was. And he would then bring that in and transfer it into smaller containers. Okay. Um, yeah. Some products need to be stored in the fridge after they're open. I mean, in general, if we are taking a can and we are opening it to use some of it, it would definitely need to go into a different container and would then need to be refrigerated. Most things, some things with high sugar don't really need to be, but a lot of the time that depends on how soon we're going to use it. And I'm thinking about jam, for example. Technically, jam doesn't need to be stored in the fridge, but if we open a container of jam and we may not open it again for another 6 months, I don't know why, for whatever reason, it can go moldy. Okay, it won't particularly go off, but yeah, it will go moldy. Um, yeah, some things need to be reconstituted before use. I'm thinking about maybe dates or yeah, dried fruits of some sort, depending on what we're going to use them for. And reconstituted means uh, soaked in a liquid, maybe some alcohol, and then they swell. And then we've got a close to um, fresh product looking item again. Um, yeah, in terms of delivery and in terms of receiving, storing, and maintain stock, we should be checking and quality checking products when they get delivered to ensure they're in undamaged packaging. That goes for all items of delivery. Okay, so frozen goods are another food group type, and some characteristics of that would be the temperature control around that. So they need to be at or below minus 15 degrees, right? So any less than minus 15 degrees, and I'm saying closer to zero, um, and that product is considered to be partly defrosted. And when we partly defrost products, we really need to be fully defrosting them and not refreezing them again. Okay. Um, Essentially, the Food Authority talks about frozen items being hard frozen. So if you can, if there's a little bit of give in a frozen product, then it's starting to defrost. Okay. You get a variety of products frozen, from fruits, seafood, meat, poultry, vegetables, frozen convenience products, pizzas, party foods, anything like this. You can see that up in the top corner there in that picture. You've got churros and other things. Yeah, sometimes products need to be defrosted before their use. Other times you need to cook them from frozen. Yeah. Same point there, right at the bottom. Quality checking when we receive deliveries. Okay, moving on. Fruit is another food group type. Right, fruits are certainly subject to seasonal availability. In Sydney, Australia, we tend to get fruits and vegetables that are not in season, but we get them all year round. Some of that means we're getting products from other countries. Some of that means we're getting products that are grown in greenhouses. Um, across various subjects, we talk about quality being a consideration around food choices, but also using products when they're in season means that they are at their best when they're in season. They are in abundance, which means there's lots of them. And when there's lots of them, they're at a cheaper price. Okay. Yeah, fruits come in various different forms: fresh, dry, frozen. You can classify them in a number of ways, right? Group them. That might mean dried, might mean tropical, stone fruit, citrus, okay, legumes, poms, berries, grains, etc. Right, maybe fruiting vegetables. Yeah. Um, yeah. I guess as they're fresh, it needs to be considered where we store them to consider the deterioration. Okay. So yeah, that's always a consideration. Meats is the next food group type that we're talking about, and the characteristics of that. Okay. Meats are a potentially hazardous high risk food. Okay. High in protein, which means, and high in enzymes as well, which means that bacteria or viruses or molds are certainly looking for something that for breeding and growing exponentially. Okay, so high risk, potentially hazardous foods. You get them in fresh or frozen, right? Maybe we get them in a whole or carcass, is what that's called. Yeah, you can get butchered or portion cuts, or maybe even larger pieces that then need to be trimmed down into smaller pieces. So primal cuts, secondary cuts is that terminology. Yeah, depending on where you work is going to determine how processed the product is. Some places receive, they focus on minimizing their labor costs, and so meats are processed to the point of how you're going to use them. And what I'm talking about there is we could order 180 gram portion control, and that would be our how we receive our product. That way, you minimise the point of consistency there. Now, the more the more staff that we have or labour we have, the more chance we have of um, uh, um, doing our own portioning and our own processing. So yeah, that's staff is always going to be a determination around that. They can be classified based on age, the age of the product, and you know, we're talking about if we're talking about lamb, we're talking about kids, mutton, lamb. If we're talking about beef, we're talking about veal or steer or other products like that, other names. You can also classify it in how it's fed, grass fed or grain fed. Around diets, the uh, grass fed is certainly the more healthy product. When it's grain fed, we see a different fat color, which means it's a different quality of fat, which, grain fed fat has so much more flavor, but it's actually not as healthy for humans to eat. Okay. Yeah, and so the determination around grain fed and is also an ideal around how healthy the meat is. So if a meat is grass fed, that means that the cows walk around, which means they're getting exercise. If it's grain fed, they tend to stand right near where they are fed and don't move too much. So that increases the fat content or the marbling score, as we call it, and that actually can mean that meats are more valued, and so they cost more. Yeah, meats include beef, game, lamb, pork, veal, and yeah, it doesn't particularly include poultry as that's a different food group type. And here we are, poultry. A lot of similar sort of points as the meat, but we do differentiate them. And a lot of that is because poultry has its own groupings, which is all around birds. Same sort of thing though, high risk food, especially chicken, which is susceptible to salmonella. So we need to have a focus on cooking that to the correct temperature and how we handle it and how we manage our mess or yeah, having a focus on making sure we're not dripping juice everywhere. Okay. It comes fresh or frozen. It comes portion control or, by the cut, of the different variations. Um, yeah, chicken, duck, game, turkey, quail. It's multiple classifications there. The benefit of grouping poultry together is handling it and how you trim it is all very similar. Okay, seafood is a food group type, and I promise you this is the last food group type. A lot of similar information there to the other food group types. Potentially hazardous, high risk. Comes fresh or frozen. A lot of it comes frozen, processed, right? You can even get it ready to go, ready to cook. Simply, you can get that with a lot of other products. We can get schnitzels, chicken schnitzels that are already crumbed, veal schnitzels that are already crumbed, hamburger patties that are already ready to cook. Same with seafood. You can get salt and pepper squid, just needs to be deep fried. Doesn't even need to be seasoned. Calamari already crumbed, fish already crumbed, battered. These are all convenience or ready to cook products. Okay. Fish, we can get it whole or filleted. It can be classified into cephalopods, crustaceans, flat or round fish, oily or white fish, saltwater or freshwater fish. Um, and yeah, there's an abundance, as you can see there. Cool. Culinary application of eggs. Yeah, a little amazing product, right? It gets used as a thickener. It gets used for glazing, for garnishing, binding, coating, aerating, setting, as a product within a dish, as an emulsifier, or for clarifying. So clarifying, we're talking about using egg whites within a consommé. Emulsion, we're talking about in a mayonnaise. We use it to emulsify mayonnaise or salad dressing. As a direct ingredient, we're talking about maybe a poached egg or a boiled egg in a salad or in a terrine. For setting, I'll come back to that one. For aerating, we're talking about cakes and pastries. For coating, we're talking about when we crumb a product. Yeah, we dip a pain anglaise. We dip it in flour and then in eggs and then in breadcrumbs. So the flour sticks to the water in the product, the egg sticks to the flour, and then the breadcrumb sticks to the egg. Okay. For binding, yeah, we're talking about using some egg whites in a mousse, maybe, and like a force meat or a farce, using that to bind the proteins. For garnishing, pretty old school, but yeah, a lot of traditional dishes used to have, aspic coating them, which is like a jelly, and then you would garnish with eggs underneath it. Or maybe it's a dressed crab would have chopped up egg yolk separate from chopped up egg white. For glazing, we can use just an egg yolk or a whole egg to brush over the top of a bread before we cook it to colour the product. As a thickener, yeah, maybe with the more eggs you use in a mayonnaise, the richer it's going to be, and of course, the thicker it's going to get. Okay, and similarly if I go back to setting, yeah, maybe that's inside a product like a terrine, or a mousse, so it's gonna hold it together, it's gonna bind it, and then as it cooks, it's gonna firm up and it's gonna set. So yeah, maybe it's a sauce anglaise, okay, and we use that to thicken, for taste, and even for taking close to setting point. It's thickening and setting. Okay. Um, cool. Moving on, we talk about mise en place. Mise en place is a basis within everything that we do, right? Mise en place means everything is in its place and everything has a place. Okay. It also means getting food and equipment, utensils ready before the cooking process starts. Okay, mise en place. MEP, we call it our MEP or our mise. And it's a French term. Mise en place translates to everything. Mise en place is in its place. Okay. There you go, Anthony Bourdain. He was, celebrity chef, amazing chef of his time. There's little quotes in there about everything's in its place, and his perspective on that. He was classically known for saying, "Do not mess with a cook's mise." He didn't say mess, but yeah, do not mess with a cook's mise. Yeah, yeah, it can really upset some chefs. I mean, fundamentally, the idea around mise en place is if we put our product in the same place every time, we're saving ourselves thinking time, right? So if my oil bottle is always in the same place, I don't need to think when I want my oil. I don't need to go, oh, where's my oil today? Because it should be in the same place, right? So I can just reach and grab it. And at the same time, I can be thinking about other things. Mise en place, there's a few other things here that we could be talking about. Okay, maybe it's checking ingredients, maybe it's weighing and measuring, maybe it's identifying equipment or gathering it, undertaking initial cleaning, washing, trimming, etc. Yeah, so lots of points come into mise en place. We talk about getting on plus before we start something, and that means getting everything into its place, right? everything in front of us. We get our equipment, we get our ingredients. We don't just turn around and say, okay, I'm going to make a cake. Right, I'm going to go get my eggs. And then I come and I open my eggs and I go, oh, I need my sugar. I get my sugar. No, we should be gathering our ingredients. We should be turning our equipment on. We should have a workflow, a mise en place list, and that's how we organise ourselves. Okay, cool. Moving on. You know, move on to stock date codes and labelling. And there's a few points there that should be included in labelling, and you can see the picture in the top right-hand corner. Some places are fantastic. They have these day dot systems or color-coded day systems, right? And there's various points that should be included in those labels, from the description of the food item, the date and the time it's produced, who made it, maybe the session, identification of the session. Maybe it's the dates around when it needs to be used, or when it's created. Okay, pretty standard, but we do talk about labeling FIFO and stock date codes, stock rotation, at various different points. These are all sort of basics of to get you started. A little bit of a basic idea within basic methods of cookery, so that then as you progress throughout different subjects, you learn about different ideas, but you've got a basic understanding, from mise en place to labelling to food hygiene to WHS. Okay, so WHS means workplace health and safety. We used to call it occupational health and safety, but it's been changed, certainly in Australia. The reason that WHS is important is the legislation talks about everyone being responsible for that. Right, so I'm responsible for you, you're responsible for me, together we're responsible for everyone. Okay. WHS might mean a varying idea of any of those points that are just there. Okay, safe operating practices means, if we should be wearing protective equipment, personal protective equipment, we should be. We need to be, for legislation and for specific reasons. Items should only be used for the purpose that they are intended. Right? So a chef's knife, we don't use that to open a can. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never overload or overfill items. Training people should be given training before they use an item of equipment. Okay. And it's certainly your right to request to be trained before you use a product or a piece of equipment. Safety items should never be removed, right? So a classic one is bowl mixers. A lot of bowl mixers now, planetary mixers, they come with a safety guard, and a lot of chefs take that off because it's makes it a challenge to use the item in the way we need to. But we're not covered by insurance if something happens to us or someone else, if we've removed the safety attachment. Never put utensils or hands inside a moving piece of equipment, and make sure if you're cleaning a piece of equipment, you unplug it before you start to pull it apart and clean it. We could be talking about jug blenders or food processors or slicing machines or any of the dangerous pieces of equipment that are powered. If we start to pull them apart, we should unplug them first. Cool. Taste. Getting into a little bit of a sciencey point here. Characteristic of dishes. And I always talk about this within food when young chefs are creating dishes. There are a variety of points that you need to consider when you are putting dishes together. That is taste, texture, color. All these things should be in balance. Okay, we need to consider the service style. Right? We need to consider the customer. the nutritional value, right? Is the nutritional value in balance? Have we just got a plate of protein? Something that my son always wants to focus on is just eating the carbohydrates. He's a little carbohydrate fiend. Um, but in terms of nutrition, we really need to be focusing on having a healthy balance as per the dietary pyramid, the Australian dietary pyramid. Okay. We need to be thinking about freshness and quality indicators, classical and contemporary variations, the appearance, the presentation, all these different points. Okay, a little bit of a glossary of terms there. Okay, I'll let you read through those. You've got a couple of the precision cuts. Zest, we should know that word. That's the outer peel of the citrus fruit. And it should be just taking the outer part off, not the white part. The white part is called the pith, and that's really quite bitter. Coating, something we would have talked about. We learned that in this subject. It's generally where we cover a product in another food item to protect it when it's cooked. Docking. Docking is a process that we use to minimize rise. Okay, maybe we are docking pizza dough before we use it. Right, so that means that we are making it expand sort of evenly rather than in certain points. Pastry, sometimes we do that to stop that rising as well. Okay. You've got Juliet there. It's the name of a sauce, clarified butter, sweating, basting, al dente, seasoning. Okay. Various points there. You can read them. Seasoning is all about adding salt, pepper, or maybe some other seasoning agent. Al dente means to the tooth, right? The Italians tend to undercook items, as Westerners would call it. It's undercooked. To them, that's perfectly how it should be. And a lot of al dente, a lot of the reason why we cook things al dente is because of the way the gut processes these foods. So if it's a little bit undercooked, it takes longer for our stomach to break it down into the sugars. Cool. So I talked about this sort of right at the beginning, and I'm about to talk about cookery methods, but all the different cookery methods that we have create different effects on products, and that's why we have all these different cookery methods, right? Sometimes it's about releasing nutrients from the food. Sometimes it's about focusing on food safety. Sometimes it's about giving structure, strength, or body to the dish. Sometimes it's about using a variety of ingredients. Other times it's about changing the color, improving the texture. Other times it's about enhancement of the taste or edibility of the product. Okay. Okay, so moving pretty close through these items, we talk about the key principles and practices of these different cookery methods. And at the same time, we talk about identifying an item from the food group and explaining the cookery method or the desired outcome. Okay, so when we're baking, this is a dry cookery method used to cook pastry goods to develop crisp textures. Okay, one of the differences between baking and roasting is there's a couple, but everyone just goes, oh, it's a dry cookery method, the other one's wet. Well, sort of. Traditionally, baking was always done in an oven and roasting was always done over a fire. So that's the classical difference because some items in baking, we need to add moisture, right? For example, bread or other sort of bready items where we inject steam to give it an initial rise. Okay, so not always a totally dry cookery method. Another difference between the two is with baking, generally, baking is about taking lots of different ingredients, mixing them together in some form, and then we bake them and they become solid. With roasting, we tend to have a solid item, and when we cook it, it's solid again at the end. So the difference there is if we think about biscuits, like the picture, we take flour, butter, chocolate, sugar, eggs, whatever's in it, and we mix them together in a certain way and put them on a tray and cook them, and then they're sealed and set, right? Using eggs. And with roasting, we might take a piece of meat and we marinate it, put it in the oven, cook it. It's still in that same solid form. It's lost a lot of water, but it's it's been roasted, whereas the biscuits have been baked. And so quite often you get a lot of older people that sort of talk about having a baked dinner. That's where the misnomer around the difference between baking and roasting sort of it clarifies that information. Cool, moving on. Boiling, we're talking about it's a wet cookery method in which the food is fully immersed in boiling water. Okay. Here we're talking about what are we talking about? We're talking about vegetables, right? Maybe the food item within vegetables is cauliflower, and the desired outcome there would mean that they soften when they're boiled, which makes them easier to eat, preserves the colour. When it's started in boiling water and left uncovered, maybe a little bit of vinegar in there just to help with the bleaching effect. Cool. Braising, right? Great little photo there. Braising is a wet cookery method. I guess the difference between braising and stewing, because they are similar cookery methods, with braising we tend to fry a product first, so it's a two-step cookery method. So if we look at that picture, and that looks like maybe a daube of beef cheeks, could be a number of things, but we would take the meat and we would fry it, get lots of color on the outside first, and then we would put it into a pot, put liquid, vegetables, and we would cook it slowly until the meat's all cooked through. Generally, when we're braising meats, we are doing that to break down the connective tissue. So this would be secondary cuts of meat, which have a lot of connective tissue, which means you would not be able to eat this when it is, if it's cooked using a quick cookery method like grilling or frying, because the connective tissue does not break down. If we slow cook it, like braising, sous vide, it breaks down the connective tissue into gelatin and then becomes all soft and delicious and easier to eat. So if we're talking about braising, we're talking about meat in general. So meats like beef would be braised to soften and allow flavors to combine and help produce a sauce or the basis for one. Cookery methods such as frying, okay? Maybe we're talking about deep frying or shallow frying. And the difference between those is that with deep frying, we're totally submerging a product into hot fat or oil, and maybe they're being battered. Shallow frying is a similar process, there's just less oil, okay? Poultry is suited to this. Poultry is suited to deep frying and shallow frying because it enables it's there for a quick cookery method. Okay, poultry is good for sous vide. It's good for deep frying. It's good for shallow frying. Okay. Generally, these cookery methods are used to soften the meat, to cook foods quickly, to provide colour, add texture, And yeah, generally when we're deep frying something, we'd be coating something in a batter first, a batter or a crumb. Okay. Grilling. Cool. You can see our guy up there who's known for his grilling. I think he looks like Seth MacFarlane. Some people say that's not right. Grilling sort of can be a couple of different methods. You can have top-down grilling, you can have bottom-down grilling, or you can have both. It's generally a dry cookery method, and it's radiated heat. Okay. Um, Difference between that is in an oven we're talking about convection heat, whereas where the heat is all around, whereas with grilling we're talking about sort of bottom up heat. Yeah, it's pretty much a quick, generally a quick cookery method, and used for prime cuts. So prime cuts meaning meats that or muscles that don't do much work, so don't have much connective tissue. When we're talking about meats that have lots of connective tissue, we're talking about the legs, and they have lots of connective tissue because they do lots of work. If you think about a cow is a huge animal, cow or an ox, really big animals. And so when you've got really big animals that carry lots of weight, those legs have got to be really strong to be able to lift that weight when they need to, right? So that's the connective tissue that we need to break down when we are um, uh, braising, or which we can't do when we're grilling. Poaching, right? Poaching and steaming are quite similar. They're both wet cookery methods. Difference there is temperature, right? So with steaming, we're at 100 degrees where water converts into a gas. And so the process there, or the cookery method, is the gas affecting the food item. With poaching, you've got a product that's sitting under the water and it's under boiling point, so it's under 100 degrees. Um, yeah, so sort of different cookery methods, very similar, but they produce different outcomes. Poaching is generally what we would use for a soft product like an egg, or maybe it's about the gentle process of cooking it. So we might make a prawn mousseline and wrap that up in a sausage shape within a piece of cling film and pop that in water, and we're going to poach that because we want those proteins to set gently. If we cook that at a high temperature, it's going to really overcook the prawn, the mousseline. Okay, so we would poach that. We could steam that as well, but again, we have to have a focus on time and temperature, which is what all cookery methods are about. Poaching and steaming are great cookery methods for seafood because of the delicate nature of seafood. We might poach mussels or steam mussels. This would impart flavour through the cooking liquid. Both of these cookery methods are considered healthy cookery methods because they don't use oil, right? So it just uses water to cook them. Okay, cool. Last couple of cookery methods coming up here. We've got blanching. Blanching is generally a two-step method. We talk about blanching and refreshing. Refreshing is not really a cookery method, so I don't mention it here. But generally, blanching is about half cooking something, right? So we might blanch nuts just to take the skins off. We might blanch vegetables to half cook them to get them ready for another cookery process later, right? Pasta, we might blanch pasta to half cook it to get it ready to use later. So if we're doing a function, we would probably half cook our pasta and then refresh it, blanch, refresh. Refreshing is about stopping the cookery process. So we put it into our boiling water to blanch it and then take it out and put it into our ice water to stop the cookery method and cool the product down quickly. Yeah, blanch, refresh. Cool, sous vide. Yeah, great process. Okay. Typically, this means under pressure. And what this is about having a product in a bag that has no air inside it, and so that means that the liquid that's inside that product really has nowhere to go. Okay, so the product that's there gets cooked in its own juice as the fourth of the temperature in the water presses onto the item. Yeah, interesting. Great process, right? This would be and the reason this is great is because it's about cooking a product to the exact temperature that you want it at. A very traditional cookery, like chicken breast, for example, is so variable in the way we cook this because items are different sizes. Okay, so if we've got a chicken breast, for example, traditionally what we would do, or classically, is we would pan fry this on the outside and then we would put it in an oven at 200 degrees and cook it until it reaches 75. So that's quite a bit of guesswork. We talk about using a thermometer, a probe thermometer, where we can stick it into it and check the temperature of it, but we're still guessing about how long that's going to take. With sous vide, we set the temperature to 75 degrees and we put the chicken breast in the bag into the sous vide, into the circulator. Right, so sous vide is the cookery method, it's not the machine. The machine is called a circulator, precision circulator, because it moves the water around. Yeah, so the item goes in the water bath and it can sit there at 75 degrees. And after about 45 minutes, depending on what temperature we're at, that product is going to be at 75 degrees and it will stay at 75 degrees. It would never go above 75 degrees. Whereas in an oven, a chicken breast will keep, if you leave a chicken breast in an oven, it will keep going up to up to 200 degrees. Yeah, so this is why we talk about it being precision cookery. And the last little cookery method there is stewing. So stewing is a wet cookery method, um, in which food is cooked in a minimum quantity of liquid needed to cover it, usually in a pan or pot on top of the stove. Maybe other items are put into it to create the final dish. Several dishes that we talk about that are stewing. We could stew fruits, right? Maybe we would use dry goods here, dried fruits. Maybe we've got lots of apples. We don't know what we're going to do to it. We would stew it. And that would, we can add juice, we can add alcohol, we can add spices, we can mix it up with fruits and create a little compote that goes with a dessert item. Maybe it goes inside a pastry. That's our stewed fruits. Okay. It makes them softer, makes them more edible, means we can add flavors into it. The little picture down the bottom there is a classic ratatouille, and that's another stewed item. The photo in the middle is a tagine, which is a traditional Middle Eastern dish. And again, this is a stewed item. Everything gets put into the pot product. Maybe it gets cooked in its own juice. Maybe juices are added to it, and it's slowly cooked within that liquid. This would slow down any enzyme reaction from the vegetable or the fruits as we're cooking it, which kills those enzymes. Cool. That's it. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Chef Christian with Prepare Basic Methods of Cookery, SITHCCC027. See you next time.